Okay, I'm going to go ahead and call this meeting of the Dunn County Executive Committee to order. Call the roll. We have everybody but Vaughn Headland and Supervisor Morehouse, who is online. I'm not sure where Vaughn is. I presume he'll show up or he will kick himself repeatedly because that would be very in keeping. Okay, let's not look at the county board agenda. Let's look at the agenda for this meeting. Okay, for approval of minutes, I would need a motion in a second. Supervisor Steen moves, Supervisor Prochnow seconds. Any speaking to the minutes? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Steen and Prochnow. Minutes are approved. Public comments, I don't have any. I recognize everybody in the room. I think we're solid on that. Moving along to the county manager's report. Take it away, Dan.
All right. So we have on here the draft county board agenda. So we have learned moving the executive committee up 1 week just makes everything happen faster. And we have a 2-week break before the actual board meeting. So just a heads up as we go through that one. This does not reflect any petitions, memorials, or other, but we do have a retirement of someone with 21 years of experience. So that will get added to the agenda by the time that comes out. So that'll be a change that'll happen. And then moving on, we plan on, as part of my report, to go give you an update on the ERP project. That update is going to be provided by either Tiffany or KT or Tiffany, and or myself. So we'll be working on that going forward. But just to give you an idea, I think it's something we haven't necessarily talked about much recently, but we are getting closer to to the time where it's going to get a little crazy as it relates to the implementation of that. So I'll just give you an idea where we are. And then I'll give an update to the 2026 budget, which will be at the newspaper hopefully by that, well, not hopefully, it must be at the newspaper by that time. So we can go forward with that. So obviously I won't get into that much right now because, well, that'll be the rest of the meeting. We have a second reading for the fund balance policy that we had the first reading for. We do have an amendment that will likely be offered. It is actually going to be a part of the packet. So you'll see that going through, but that's unofficial until it actually gets offered up. And then we have the approval of the fund balance and net working capital policy. That's something that's on the agenda for this committee right now. So pending the approval of those two, that'll go forward. And budget amendments for human services and public health, and rezone, and a resolution authorizing the application of surface water grants from the Department of Natural Resources is something that was approved by PRD this morning. So that'll be going forward to the board. And then we have the resolution adopting the pay plan and wage structures, and the resolution adopting the 2026 health and dental premium. So of much debate at the last county board meeting, those are the two resolutions that truly set the pay and the benefits. So that'll be moving forward to the county board this week, and I believe it's also on the agenda for us today. And then finally, second reading of a couple of ordinance changes for the sheriff's department related to fee increases. So that's what we have for the agenda. And I didn't update the next meeting, but so the next meeting of the board would obviously be on November 12th. And that is as much as that is a Wednesday, it is not the typical Wednesday. It's the second Wednesday rather than the third Wednesday. So So that'll impact also the executive committee meeting. So that's what we have for the agenda. So the next item in the, I have down for the county manager's report is something that I wanted to discuss after it had come up a couple of times after the changes to the rules of the board. So I wanted kind of the advice of this group, as you are the chairs of all of the committees, as to how we want to manage public comments, specifically those over email. But there are obviously some rule changes that I don't know that we've really kind of discussed. We discussed the rules, but we didn't really discuss what that looks like in managing them in a meeting and outside of a meeting. And, of course, day one, as soon as that happens, there's an annexation and a whole bunch of public comments. So, so I wanted to bring that out. There was a few things that had come up. So one of them is emailed comments. So we, as we pass these rules, we no longer read comments that were sent over email out loud in the meetings. So what that means is when somebody submits a public comment over email, we would acknowledge that as part of the record, but we wouldn't necessarily read it out loud. And we would obviously share that with the members of the committee in which it was intended to go to. When you couple that with the requirement that all comments must be germane to an item on the agenda, that means when that email is received, a determination has to be made whether that email is germane to the agenda. And obviously there's a level of interpretation that can happen there. One of the items, one of the things I think we didn't think about, I certainly didn't think about as those rules were changed, is a member of the public submitting a comment, which just goes off into the ether. And then a determination is made whether we're going to acknowledge that or not. All of a sudden, then the meeting happens, their comment isn't acknowledged in the record. They have no reason to know why it was or wasn't. And other members also didn't receive that. So I think that's a little bit of a question of how do you want to manage that? So that's happened a couple of times. I sent an email to the entire county board right after we passed the rules with 4 or 5 emails that had come in intending to be public comment that didn't qualify. I sent them all to you, said, this is not officially public comment, but doesn't hurt for you to be aware of something that your constituency wanted you to know. So that's a practice that we can implement, but I think there is also a level of deciding whether that should go, determining whether it's germane or not. Technically, it is the board chair. It's number 7 on the screen right there. That it is the board chairs or the committee's chairs right to make that determination. So that's all of you. So I guess I'd stop right there and ask your thoughts as it relates to how would you like us as staff to be able to manage that? We can certainly make a determination ourselves. Some of them are easy. Some of them maybe require a level of thought.
So I'll jump in because Dan and Jenna and I spent a good deal of time talking about this on Monday morning. And things that came up is any communication with the board that is intended to, well, any communication with the board over email is de facto a public record. So if someone sends those in, anyone who wants to see them can see them, which suggested to me that one possible solution would be to create a space in the packet that is essentially constituent communications to the committee. And because that wouldn't be part of the meeting proper, then the only determination would be whether the communication met the other rules for board communication. So you wouldn't have it, that might simplify the decision tree, but I am entirely open to a better answer than mine. Supervisor Steen.
Yeah, on the written communication, if a person comes in a meeting and wants to speak and you roll, it's not in order, it's not correct, what kind of answer does he get if his written communication is not accepted?
I think that's part of my question. Like, what do we want to respond back to them to say, thank you for submitting your comments. We have sent them off to the members of the committee. However, they do not meet the rules of chapter 2 of our ordinance, so they will not become a part of the public record. Right? Something to that effect.
Personally, I would be in favor of a response because they get a response from you if they come in person, and they should get a response if it's written, that it's not accepted, because if it's accepted, then it doesn't matter. That's how I look at it anyway.
Yeah, that was one of the reasons why I was thinking in terms of essentially a piece of the packet that's constituent communication, because it isn't part of the meeting record proper. So not part of the minutes, but it is part of the packet and would be part of the public record. You wouldn't necessarily need to make that determination. You wouldn't need to say, this is in order, this is not. Now, if everybody wants to get all of the emails for their respective committees and make that decision, I'm all for it. That's a great thing for chairs to do. But if the chairs would like a simpler solution, we'll try and find one.
Kelly?
Yes, Supervisor Morehouse.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So in this constituent communication, would the email or emails be included in the packet?
Essentially, they would either be included in the packet or they would be a separate PDF of their own.
Okay,
Because they could come in last minute. I think
Yeah.
a lot of them we receive
right.
pretty well in advance, but some are last minute.
Question.
Supervisor Wilson.
So a question that came up, like the data center. I know some people are gonna show up at the PR&D committee and ask questions. So I was curious, were they able to ask those questions where it's not on the agenda, or were they turned away? You allowed, okay. So it's up to the,
But, and I can tell you, and timing of everything, right? This is this morning. There was an agenda item as it related to the
Oh, there was,
comprehensive
okay.
plan today that, and I was gonna get into a little bit, right? You get to, there's a level of interpretation, right? So an interpretation could have been that we were looking at farmland preservation in the comprehensive plan, and does that apply? It's you very well, it does apply. So we sat there with Corp Counsel in the room saying, yes, I think that does apply. But I think if they did get to the point that they were talking about something completely off agenda, then that was going to be my next question. How do we want to manage that particular situation?
Supervisor Kinnear.
Thank you. Where does that put us as a chair if someone comes in and if I say, I'm gonna let everybody do it? Or I'm saying, well, that's connected to this, just peripherally, it's okay. How much leeway do we have and
So I think the short answer to that, okay, committees, small committees operating under small committee rules have a little bit more leeway than, for example, the more formal board meeting. But it is appropriate for you if someone brings up something that is completely off agenda. In fact, it's pretty much required for you to say, I'm sorry, that doesn't meet our agenda, and then have that stricken from the record.
the word required is what I was looking for.
Yep.
Yeah, it is an ordinance, which is county law, that says that public comments must be germane to an item on the agenda.
Now, you have a lot of leeway in deciding what's germane, but I think that things that are obviously wildly out of agenda are generally fairly obviously wildly out of agenda.
So you just said that we'll probably have a little more leeway on our committees than the county board.
Yeah, because committees, so the rules governing committees are more informal than the rules governing the board as a whole. The ordinance, however, is pretty sharp and clear. It's just, you have a little bit more leeway, as a committee chair to govern the conversation that is happening in your committee than, for example, I do when I'm doing, well, this would be like midway between a standing committee and the board is how I would characterize the way I feel about the formality of these conversations.
And we're talking about written or oral, right? Same thing.
Same rules apply. But-
Okay,
But it's a certainly different experience in how so it's very easy to deny an email because you just delete it, right? Unless we define how we want to manage that. When there's a person standing in front of the podium, you have to call them to order and and essentially make them stop. And I think that's a question of how do you want that to be done? Either Jenna or myself and potentially somebody from Corp Council will be at these meetings and we can assist when we recognize that and help you be aware that this is not germane. This doesn't seem to be germane. Do you want to make a judgment call on that, or do you want that? Essentially, you can blame us for pointing out the rule in that particular case. Or we can sit silent and allow for you to make those determinations on your own. I think the other item to kind of think about as you do that is making sure that we are being fair as to how we go about that. So we had a discussion over email with Supervisor Morehouse. There was a public comment made that was or an emailed comment that was made to it was praising a staff member in public comment, which is something that's great that we would love to hear, right? So now, but is that public comment, was that related to an item on the agenda?
No.
Well, and does it fit all of the other rules of
Right.
public comment?
Yeah, right. Does it fit all of the other rules, of which there are, I think it's 9 of them. But the other side of that is if this was a comment that was made not praising an employee, would we include that? Because if you include praising, you have to include the other side. Now, actually, as it relates to praising or saying anything about it, you're not supposed to allow any of them, but that comment comes true. So
Well-
if you're going to allow 4, you have to allow against.
Yeah, and that's with regards to things that fall solidly within the rules for public comment.
Yep.
Which is again, one of the reasons why I think that we in general want to err on the sides of getting as much information from constituents as possible. So if someone sends an email in that is not germane to an agenda item, but is germane to a committee's broader mission or is intended for a committee, I feel like that email should go to the committee, even if it isn't considered appropriate within the rules of public comment to be considered a public comment.
and that's what you just said is exactly what I was hoping. Anything that's sent to my committee, or anything that has to do with my committee, I want to see it. And then we can decide whether to do that or not, or put it on the next agenda or anything like that. But I would definitely like to see anything related to the committee I'm on.
Supervisor Vogel and then Supervisor Steen.
Thank you. So I was curious if we put constituent comments into the packet, and they're not germane to the agenda, are we giving priority to written communication? Because if someone shows up at the meeting, their public comment doesn't get on the record unless they wrote it down and sent it. So would that cause a conflict?
So, yeah, it's a reasonable question. So the way that I parsed that when I was thinking about it is, and this is why I think it might need to be its own PDF separate from the packet proper. So it is de facto a part of the record. So anyone could ask for that information at any time. Any actual comment at a public meeting the way we do things now is also being recorded, so that is also accessible to the public in a digital format. It's just accessible in video versus text. So that was, I think that's the way that they are close to equivalent. But those things that would not be appropriate for public comment that come up in a meeting, you're going to have to rule out. Supervisor Steen.
Yeah, I just, this issue, I think is gonna need a lot of thought. You do not want to inhibit the interaction with the people. You do not want to give the impression that you don't want to talk to them. So I think this will, how to handle it is gonna take a pretty good amount of thinking. And in my experience, and not at your level, but at my littler level, I tended to give more leeway for somebody that came with an issue if they took time out of their life to come there, because they don't know Robert's Rules of Order. They don't know a lot of stuff. And you don't want to slap somebody down because they don't know that stuff. But so I'm saying you don't want to inhibit the interaction. And I think that's a perception is sometimes reality. And you want to be careful about how you approach this. Thank you.
Supervisor Quinn.
Sorry. Yeah, thank you. I like this idea of a distinction between comments that are germane to the agenda and communications with the board. And can't we, so if we make that, if that distinction is made, then it can be made for both written and verbal. So a chair could say, when it's clear that someone is is going to make a statement that's not germane to the agenda, could say, thank you. That's, however, not directly germane to the agenda. However, it will be noted in the communication with the board. You can't take it off the video at that point in time. But.
Yeah, I think it is. There are some hoops to be jumped through on that, but I think that
What would they be?
Both there, I mean, there's some technical ones, but also some ordinance issues. And I haven't thought them through fully.
Okay.
But it rang a bell in the back of my head that said I need to think about that piece some more before I give you a really good answer on it. But yeah, I do think we want to encourage that communication from constituents. It's just how to do that. And I mean, one of the reasons we adopted the rules that we did on public comment are that's generally been the advice of counsel from WCA and municipal, also League of Municipalities, all of those folks, both for open records reasons and because of some partisanizing of public comment in the few remaining counties that were had fully open public comment. I think with our change, there are of the 72, either 5 or 6 left who have completely unregulated public comment.
I think the emailed public comment is something that may be unique to us, something that we had enabled, and I think a lot of places probably did over COVID. We never got rid of that because it was a nice channel to be able to allow people to make comments. Obviously, you've all probably received public comments from an individual in the county who's unable to make it to meetings due to they're just unable to make it here. So so to enable that is allows more members of the public to be able to make those comments. So I think there's a good thing about it, but I think that's where the collision of those two changes is kind of where I think we're treading in new water.
Yeah, that was why the first solution that occurred to me is the idea of, for email at least, have that subsection that is constituent comment. So you don't have, if you treat all of that, and we may have to make an ordinance change, I'll have to reread it. But if you treat all of that collectively as electronic constituent comment and treat it all the same way and make it available to everybody via PDF, that completely sidesteps the issue of whether you have to look into whether these are appropriate to public comment. So it gives you it gives you sort of the maximum latitude to receive that commentary and to be able to hear what your constituents are saying, while not having to make so many fine-grained distinctions, and worry entirely about whether is this really a public comment, or is this, just something that everybody on this committee should be aware of, or is just something that I should say kudos to my staffers about. There's a bunch of stuff in that space that could all be bent together as constituent commentary without requiring the sort of the fine-grained look. But as I said, if chairs want to do that sorting, I am open to that. I just feel that maximizing communication while minimizing friction is probably the way to go. Supervisor quit.
So I think that it would make sense for, well, I guess my initial thought is it would make sense for staff or the board chair to make a determination as to whether or not an email comment was germane to the agenda. But in the meeting itself, it seems like that decision is going to have to be made by as to whether, someone's going to start talking, and unless you want to cut them off, which is going to be, I think, feel quite uncomfortable and rude. They're going to finish their comments and their allowed time. And then what do we want to have counsel or you or counsel or administrator say, well, that's just not germane to the agenda. So wouldn't it be better to have the chair make that determination at that point in time and in a heartfelt way say, appreciate you being here, and your comments will be put into communication with the board, but note that this is not relevant to this topic today. But I don't know. But
Yeah, cutting people off is never particularly fun, but it is part of the job.
well, if they go on, when do you cut people off? How do you know what someone is going to say before they say it? And isn't the risk of them saying something that's not on topic pretty de minimis compared to the risk of alienating somebody who has a sincere opinion, and you cut them off before they're allowed to express it?
I don't know. I have cut supervisors off as they have departed from the agenda because that's part of the job.
True. But
I don't particularly enjoy it.
But I think that's a different category than a constituent that may be unfamiliar with the rules.
I'm going to be diplomatic. Supervisor Proctor.
Well, if it's on your agenda that says public comments only to, instead
Yeah.
of just saying public comment, it should say public comment only to the agenda items. If they're gonna talk, they'd have to know it's gotta be an agenda item.
Yeah.
It shouldn't just say public comment. It should really say public comment.
Yeah.
Per whatever.
For agenda items only. Yeah.
And as far as the email goes, so the ones that are not germane, we would still get a PDF of those so we could read all them. Yeah, then
Yep.
I'd be fine with that. So, but I really do think the public comment should say to agenda items only instead of just public comment.
Yeah, we should actually have that on all of the agendas. Good point. I think my brain has been filling that in on its own without actually looking at the agenda closely. Supervisor Bauer.
That's kind of where I would go into the same thing, even before they get up, you say, they gotta give their name address. Now, does this pertain to our agenda item before you start speaking? And if they say no, well, then please, we like your thank you for coming, but it's not germane, so.
Yeah, and please feel free to contact us through Registein. This is an informal one. We all get a lot of bites at the apple.
I would suggest that we do away with the online email comments. Make all your comments in person, like it used to be. That way, if an issue is important, and it's pretty easy to pound out an email. It takes a little more gumption to come into the meeting and stand up. Thank you.
Dan, you
Mr.
look
Chairman.
like, oh, Supervisor Morehouse.
Yeah, none of us is very good at this, but when we should require that people sign in when they come to make a public comment, and they could note the topic of their comment. So we would see it in advance. So Bob, we wouldn't have to tell them to be quiet.
That would be entirely appropriate. Excellent suggestion. Okay,
So I think we're good. We'll come up with some kind of guidelines and procedures around there and share them in a future meeting, and we will certainly get the agendas updated to say.
And the website too, Dan.
yeah.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah, it
If you-
seems like a fairly simple question, but the deeper you dig, the less simple it gets.
Yeah, we did add some language if you look at your agenda around so it's right above the agenda where the public comment email address is that kind of defines some of the rules. But yeah, nobody reads that. They see the link and click it. But
Yep.
So, all right, we will get back to you with that.
Okay. On to 6. Reports, resolutions, and ordinances to the county board from the executive committee. Review and recommendation of draft FY 2026 county budget. Everybody's favorite topic. So Dan, do you want to start us off?
Yes, so we will. You have all received, you all received a link today from Vieta with all of the budget documents. I think some of you are aware, maybe not all, but we let's sneak forward in the in the presentation. So so we wanted to kind of go over, obviously the last time we had met, you also saw that there was some changes at the county board meeting between our last meeting and this meeting, and we have some more changes. So we eliminated the position requests at the guidance of this committee. We set the wage variance at 2%. That health insurance premium decrease was that change between executive and the county board meeting that went from 18 to 13. Applied $3 million for highway projects. We have the fund balance policy changes and some associated budget reductions related to that. We allocated indirect administrative costs across funds. And then we did have some changes to and I shouldn't say changes, the final numbers to state aid, and well, not the final numbers for sales tax, but every month we get a little bit better to where we're getting at with those numbers. So made some changes related to that. So in addition to that, we did have some changes that were part of that program review that have already been in the works. So those changes have been implemented in the budget. So one of that was the POUTS things, POUTS fee changes. Those are septic systems for those of us that live in the city. So implemented some changes there, as well as you see on our agenda for the county board, the changes to the sheriff's department's fees are also something that are being implemented. So we have had some work done related to those program reviews. As a result of all of those changes, we were able to end with a balanced budget.
Wow.
So this is what that looks like. This is a little bit more simplified version of that that multicolor one. So a little bit of the extra detail related to the revenue isn't in this one, but you can see everything is balanced in the documents that Beata shared earlier today. Also reflects all of those changes. So that being said, I was in the weird position of putting this all together to talk about program reviews and how does all of this go? And well, we have a balanced budget. That being said, a lot of what has been done in order to balance that budget is a this year thing. And the changes going forward, we're going to continue to have to look at different ways of doing things going forward. So we want to make sure that we keep focus on evaluating these programs and talking through what are these changes, what are the things that we need to be looking at throughout 2026 so that we are in a situation to have a balanced budget in 27 and beyond without going through these changes with 2 months to go or a month to go every year. So really want to focus throughout 2020, the year 2026, the rest of 2025, on identifying things that can be done throughout this year so that the 27 budget is easy.
Easier.
Easier, yes. And you're probably all aware, right? The 2027 budget will be one that is done with a brand new board. So you've all been new board members before, but in April we have that, which gives very little time for a new board to get versed in what it takes to do all of this. So the more prepared we can be, the easier that is kind of moving forward. So that being said, we are still going to go over those programs and kind of dig into the recommendations that the department has come back. You can see, obviously, we have a full room here. And we'll give them an opportunity to kind of talk through what that change is and what those impacts are so that you're aware of that as we move forward. So just as I talk about, we need to continue to look forward to this. This is the exciting part of the presentation where I share some future projections here. So what we did here is put together, if we were to do a 3% salary increase and 5% health insurance. So I would call those probably modest changes, right? But it gives us an idea of kind of what that looks like. And then on the revenue side, and this is really just levy related, so really think of that general fund column, because other areas that have different revenue sources, those revenue sources fluctuate in how much they can increase. So look at 1.5% net new construction. That's actually a pretty good number. We hit 1.89 this year, but we usually live around 1.4. So it's kind of a safe number, but maybe even on the high side. And then 3% increase to sales tax is another item there that we put in these projections. So this is a bar graph. So this is a percentage. And as I was putting this together, I accidentally clicked on this one, but I thought it was really interesting in that it's showing. So that blue column is the levy. Specifically the non-debt service. So this is just that kind of that operational money that we have available. The orange is our sales tax and the gray is state aid. So that's the changes that we have in state aid. So as you can see, it's somewhat small, but if you look, we went from about 78% in 2021 funded by levy, and we are at about 68%. So about 10% change in being funded by property taxes versus sales tax or state aid, which is technically income tax that comes through through the state in that regard. So I just thought that was pretty interesting as you look at that change in where that funding comes from. And one thing that's kind of important to look at there is levy does not fluctuate much based on the economy, right? Net new construction certainly has an impact on that, but the levy holds steady. Sales tax and our state aid are both tied to sales tax. So sales tax, the county sales tax is sales tax. Our state aid goes up and down based on state sales tax. So if state collects more sales tax, our state aids go up. If they collect less sales tax, our state aids go down. So they're very much tied to the economy. So if you talk about like recessionary times or other things, we're a little bit more susceptible to those types of changes as you see that change. All right, same graph, but this is by the actual numbers and not by percentage. So this is kind of where our available funding is really that operational money. What do we call it? Levy and friends is the new term. As that goes up. So once again, the blue is our levy, the orange is sales tax, and gray is state aid. So you can see how those are going up over time at very fixed rates. So these percentages that we picked, they're historically very accurate as to what that's going to look like. So you'll see that we have a slight increase every year. That increase is going to be somewhere around $600,000. So this next slide, we were joking before we came here. Everybody's going to leave confused. So I want to kind of set up this next slide a little bit, because what you're going to see on the next slide is really that gap between last year and this year, or between the previous year and the next year. Where does that change? Where does that additional ongoing revenue come from? Because that's what, when we talk about salary changes, it's that jump up that is paying for those salary changes over time. So where's that money coming from? So as you look back, and you can kind of see some of the weird dynamics that have happened over the few years. So in 2020, you can see that, our sales tax didn't go up very much. That's in this case, blue is that sales tax. If you look at 2020, orange is a levy limit or a levy increase. So a lot of that levy increase was due to TID closure that year. That allowed us to increase our levy by that much more. And then you have a very small increase in state aid. 2021, you see a whole lot of small stuff. There might have been something going on around that time that impacted a lot of these things. 2022, you start to see a big jump in sales tax increases. So we've talked about this in the past. We had an anomaly in our sales tax. There was an individual company that had sold something in Dunn County that gave us ultimately like $400,000 or $500,000 in like one purchase for 2 consecutive years. That kind of led to that, and we knew it was going to come back down, and we see that.
Clearly it has.
So then 2023, you also see an increase in the levy. There was another TID closure that happened that year. Then we have the big state aid increase. So if you followed all of that as I was going down, the state changed the law and increased the amount of state aid that we were going to get, right? So that's what happened. We got a whole lot more state aid. But then that continues to climb at a smaller amount over time as you look through the rest of them. And then you can kind of see going on, we're starting to normalize a little bit. Right, you're not seeing too many of those major changes. I guess I should point out one more. There was a change in the available levy, the levy limit that that kind of happened right in, it's a swap between levy and state aid, which is personal property tax, which came off of one and showed up on the other. That's how that one had happened. So what I did, and where that gray line is what it would look like to provide, or how much salary increases would cost for the general fund, right? So this is kind of what we run into every year of, we don't have enough money. And that's because these are the increases that you're seeing every year. And that gray line is what it would look like to provide a 3% increase with 5% benefits to employees. We have a gap between the amount of additional revenue we're receiving and that fixed, or that increasing cost of salary and fringe on an annual basis.
So I'm gonna throw something in here real quick. Dan and I at WCA went to a different format budgetary prioritization exercise that another county does, and they do it very early in their budgetary year, either April in a year where there's no election or May in a year where there is an election. And it looked like a really good place to start on that prioritization and to do it very early so that whoever the board is at that point, whoever the board chair is, whoever is on this committee, they're having those discussions and having the tools to have those discussions with a little bit more clarity, starting very early in the budgetary year.
Yep. Because it was really what that exercise was about, is looking at in 2027, this column right here is about $600,000. So between our budget this year and our budget next year, we have $600,000 to spend. What do you want to spend it on? Salary and fringe increases is going to be about 700,000 or 800,000. So what do you want to spend your 600 on, right? So that's kind of where those questions start to come in. And I think that's where, as we talk about getting to the position to be able to do that, how do we set ourselves up now to be able to solve that problem for next year? Told you this was going to be the best part of the so, all right. So we did want to kind of focus in on the program reviews. And like I said, we have a balanced budget, but I do think as we continue to look at these, and what we've talked about is, I don't know that we need this committee to make a determination as to, yes, you should do this, or yes, you shouldn't do that. You can certainly discuss and do whatever you want. But I think it's most appropriate for a lot of these to go back to their committees, which is where a lot of these decisions should be happening. But to have that kind of discussion here so that you get a feel for how your colleagues in different committees feel about some of these different topics as they come back to your committee to be able to do that. I think it had come up a little bit as we were doing the budget workshop, right? If every committee agrees to everything that the departments present in their budget, we will have we will have too much ask, right? And not enough to be able to fill that with. So it's important that we kind of really dig in and have that mindset. So we broke up those programs and the recommendations that the department heads had put together into a few different kind of strategies or different ways of identifying savings.
Dan, does this include all 31?
It does not have all 31 because there are some of them that have already been implemented. And so
Right.
Because they had already been implemented, we didn't include them in the rest of that presentation. Yeah, and I would point out, I think it was Supervisor Vogel that had asked for us to bring it up to department heads to, throw out any additional ideas outside of the 31 programs that we had some. So I'll point them out as we get to those in those points. So the areas that we have: cost claiming, fee increases, funding strategy, ordinance policy, procedural changes, program elimination, or reduction. So the first area is cost claiming. So explain that a little bit, but it's ultimately asking, well, I don't know what's a good way to describe this. So in a lot of these cases, it was like a grant, like that's an expense we feel like we could get reimbursed by a grant if we were to include that. So you see a couple of them with CJC. That Sarah was able to identify that she was able to claim those items. So we've kind of worked on getting those. They're not quite in the budget yet, just from a timing standpoint, but I think that's something that we're looking to move forward with. And then, yeah, do you want to, Jen, speak to to the first one? And I would say, as we kind of put these up, this is your time. If you have questions, the department heads are here, and we can go over each of those programs. So Jenna actually oversees the website and social media communications. So speak to that.
Yes, and actually I need to give credit where it's due. This was kind of an idea coming from Carmen at NDC around consulting for their web management. And so the idea was, could we provide that service by our current digital media and communication specialist instead of the NDC outsourcing that? And so we would, I guess, essentially charge NDC for managing the web, and they would pay us instead of a third party. And so anticipating about a $10,000 opportunity there. And I will also note, kind of in the middle, we did try to note when there were programs that have changes already implemented in 2025, right? That wasn't captured in the 2025 budget, but things have changed. One of those being the elimination of the chief information officer position. So previously, this program was managed by the CIO, which was Dan. When he was appointed to county manager, the CIO position was not filled. Instead, they restructured with the existing staff that they had. And so that 3,300 is representative of the amount that was allocated to that program by the CIO.
I meant to point that out, and it is something you'll see in a lot of the different columns. So the program information that we put out there, and the priority-based budgeting work that we did was based on the 2025 budget. So there had been changes that happened between the 25 and 26, which those changes, as good as they might be, don't impact the 2026 or beyond budget. So we wanted to make sure that we identified them. Is Sarah here or online? So.
Yes,
sorry.
Dave, on the
Yep,
phone.
you are. All right. So you can see in there, there's a treatment court program, and that is indirect cost via grants. You want to speak to that, Sarah?
Sure. So I apologize for not being there in person. I was at the State Jail Administrators Conference presenting on grants this afternoon. So yes, we have put forth a couple of cost saving suggestions. We have a new opportunity on our state treatment alternatives and diversion grant. New in 2026 is to claim up to 15% in indirect costs. So what was not part of the priority-based budgeting was that we received a $100,000 grant to support our treatment court. So we're able to, in the next year, 2026, claim the indirect costs for $15,000 of that $100,000 grant for treatment court. So that would be kind of bringing in some revenue to the county. And then if I could speak to the treatment opportunity program, likewise, this is a state treatment alternatives and diversion grant. Very small portion of it is actually levy funded, but we are able to claim $5,000 back for 2026 on those indirect costs. And then in 2027, it goes competitive again, meaning we can request more funding. And with that funding, be able to hopefully maximize that 15% for the treatment opportunity program. And then division-wide, we are proposing that we actually eliminate a half-time program assistant. We had a 3/4 time assistant, and she went to finance. So we have her just a quarter of a full-time employee, but we found that was really sufficient for what we need for that fiscal support. So we are recommending that we actually eliminate that half-time position.
All right.
All right, thank you.
Any questions for Sarah? I know she's on the road right now, so.
I did just pull over at a quick
All
trip.
right. All right. So,
I don't see any, and Diane hasn't spoken up, so
No, I don't
I
have any
think you're off.
questions. Thanks, Kelly.
I think you're off the hook, Sarah.
Thank you.
So the next one is public inquiry assistance and relations. And so that's an item, it's very hard, right? So a lot of the costs, or almost all of the costs associated with that program were staff costs, and they're staff costs that aren't going to go away. They're not dedicated time. This was really, and I don't remember what the total amount of that program is. But what that is open records requests. When we receive them, we have to spend time to be able to do that. We're required by law to do that, and it takes a significant amount of time. And so what we did identify there is that there may be some issues that we have, or some procedures that we could implement that would allow us to make sure that we are maximizing any of the costs that we can recoup through that process. So we're allowed to charge, as long as it's greater than $50, for the time it takes to discover documents. So that would be paying somebody to go to the file cabinet and sort through all of the items in order to do that. So there's rules as to how you determine those costs and go through a lot of that. And I think that we just want to make sure, I think if we can button up that process and make sure, it's one of those things you spend all of this time and then you have to go calculate how much cost it is. And I think it's an easy thing to just be like, whatever, let's just move on. It's over, and please stop asking. But putting together the policy and procedure and updating the ordinance related to that, we think we could probably do a better job of making sure that we're getting paid for those requests when they come up. And so that's where that $2,000 came from.
Well, and we've been on the big list, sorting out public records requests and making it a more consistent and more efficient process has been on the list for a while, so.
Yep.
Might as well pick up a little savings while we're at it.
Yeah. And so, I mean, and to be clear, right, that is charging the public, that is asking for open records to receive the records that they are entitled to. So it's, there's things to be balanced with all of these items that come out there, but we've seen in the past, and I think nationwide, where some of these things have become weaponized is the terminology that gets out there, but it can be an amazing amount of time, and most of that time. So when you talk about redaction of we cannot charge for redaction, just discovery. That's where the time is spent, is in redaction. If you have to go through thousands of documents and protect the names of people. So there's a lot of costs that's associated with that program, but this is little something we think we can get out of it. Any questions related to that program? Oh, yes, Jenna's got a handout for you. That's got all of these programs with a little bit more detail.
Can you email it to me, Jenna?
I did email it right before the meeting. Hopefully you got
Oh,
it.
okay.
All right, so this one, fee increases with the stars next to them. These are the ones that, or they could be asterisks. We're going with stars. These are the ones that were submitted by departments that were not part of the 31 programs. I think it's as they looked at some of their programs, they may have said, hey, but you know what, I could do this in this area, or I could do that there, or would this work? So we wanted to kind of get this in front of you so that you were able to see that there are some additional opportunities. So equipment rental program, is Chase here? No. So this is, there's, I don't know the name of the thing. There's some equipment that they have. What's it called? The no-till drill that they rent out. And so this would be just increasing the fees for that. So it's an item as we look at that's increased revenue. But I think there was also some thoughts around right now. It's something that they deliver to people, and so there's time with that. There's also relationships that happen as you're delivering that to a farmer and educating them in those areas. But looking at that and the amount of time that's being spent in there is something that would they were looking at there. But that's mainly the cost increase. As much as we value the human side of Chase not driving across the country or county, somebody driving across the county to be able to do that. There's some savings there, but that not in the bottom line. Next one, farmland preservation program, charging a fee for service of $50 per acre. Obviously, this is something that's put in there where 2027 is more realistic. This is obviously a fee that can be charged. But I think as you look at a lot of these different things, it's about adoption. So if you were to implement this fee or increase this fee, are people less likely to adopt a practice that you want them to adopt? So it's an option, but there's trade-offs that come with all of these different items. Land use regulation. I'm looking at Tammy. Can you help me with that one? Increased permit fees or land use regulation. Oh, manure storage. Right. So yeah, so permits for the work that's done for the management of mines or manure management type areas. It's a lot of work that the environmental services staff does. And it's something they could charge for. But once again, I think we get back into that. Hoping to have our landowners implement good practices. And if we charge them for that, are they less likely to kind of go through that? But these are a few of the options that Jason put up. And then the producer-led watershed group grants. So this is if you're familiar, and some of the PR&D people can probably speak to this a little bit better than me, but this is a program of farmers out there that are working together to come up with practices that will help with the watershed and the nitrates going back into the water and into the bodies of water. So as they pursue different grants. That's something that kind of as a service, the Environmental Services Department helps facilitate. Whether that's because we're the only people that can apply for the grant or whether we're providing that just as an assistance, that's something that we could do. And so this is really looking at providing, adding an administrative cost to doing that work for them, which would help pay for the staff to do that work. But once again, I think, doing that, that's another, in this case, $7,050 that maybe doesn't go into actual practice. So.
Well, and I mean, I think one of the things that the committee, since these are going to mostly be broken out to the individual committees with which the programs are associated, to have those discussions in depth, because the committees are the people who are going to be in the best position to say, what's the policy challenge of this versus the savings. But for example, looking at that, one of the things that instantly occurs is, so the equipment rental program, if that were eliminated, that gives more time, for example, to help with grants. So there are all of those trade-offs that are going to be part of that discussion in your individual committees. It was just one of those things that those two items are pretty easily linked. So I thought it was worth bringing that to just putting that in the back of your head as the kind of calculations you're going to have to be mentally making in your various committees.
Right. And, one of the things that we as a kind of a budget group had talked about is, as a committee, setting policies for the departments as to how they should go about that. To say, it's our policy that if you are going to help out with a grant, that we will receive X amount of money for that service, for all the grants. Like that is an expectation for if you are going to do that, or a certain amount of recoup of costs that are associated with different programs. So setting some of those guidelines for departments to understand where that is. And then you're not choosing, well, we don't want to receive additional costs to do grants for the producer-led watershed, but for the snowmobile association, I want you to charge them, right? So where's the equity? Where's the policy? Where's the guidance as it relates to all of those? So I think those are things from a committee standpoint that you can look at, setting some of those guidelines for staff to use moving forward.
Well, and as much as I personally am not a huge fan of the process, strategic planning and reassessing our county goals, which we have not looked at for
You moved to the last slide,
a
Kelly.
very long time.
And we need to,
Nope. All right. Any questions related to that? Chase isn't here. If you couldn't tell, I was making up a lot of that. No. So. All right. What's that? So these are more fee increases. These are parts of the programs that had been identified through the project. So we have the geographic information systems external. And so I described that a little bit of the word external in there. So as we were doing priority-based budgeting, we were kind of battling, like, how do we do this? So the GIS system, so if you go online to go see who bought some property, go ahead.
Quick question.
You get to
Oh, sorry,
acknowledge
Luke.
people. Sorry.
Quick question. Equipment rental, like the no-till drill. Why does the county have a no-till drill? Or why do we need one?
It's to encourage the practice. So if we want individuals to try that practice, here's some equipment so that you can do that, so you don't have to make that initial investment into something that you may not be using on an ongoing basis.
Okay.
But yeah, exactly those questions.
Yep. So yeah, so there was the online system where you can go look at parcels, and all of that tax data is something that is used for us internally in order to calculate tax bills and do all of that. Is kind of like the same system. as well as it is made available externally. And so as you look at internal programs versus external programs, we were trying to battle between what is this, an internal or an external program? So that's why you see external. There was an internal side to that as well. And you're looking at fees related to that. Rachel, do you want to speak to the fees? Yeah. Sorry, I don't get to call people to the. No, you're good. So-
So actually in looking at fees related to the external GIS services, we don't charge for the GIS sites specifically. But we do receive requests for data, GIS data, and we actually receive quite a few requests for tax data, and our office has historically taken care of that just because we handle the packaging and any technical questions that come along with it and like sharing of disclaimer information. So we actually do have a fee schedule and a form online for people to be able to request that information. And in doing kind of the analysis of the time aspect, so one of the proposals that I had is actually increasing fees for some of those items that take a longer time to generate, like tax data requests. And it would also be more in alignment with neighboring counties for how much they charge for services. And for some of them, actually, it would actually be more cost effective if we made some of these data sets available at no charge because they're kind of static data sets that don't change. So we actually spend more time in staff time processing the payments and packaging up the data for people than it actually we receive back. So that is what it is for the external services.
You can go to property addressing if you want as well.
Sure. Yeah, while I'm up here. So property addressing. So our department issues addresses for towns. There's currently a fee schedule that just has fees for new addresses. So someone new build, new business, there's a charge for that. And then it's currently a charge for $75 for a new one. And for a replacement or an additional sign, it's $30. And doing the analysis for that, it doesn't quite cover the cost time. It does cover the materials. And we did make a switch in 2024 to a vendor that has actually been more responsive and timely in turning around address signs. But they also do come at a lower cost, which has been really great. But we are proposing increases to the new signs. And that would be more in alignment with some neighboring communities as well. And a very nominal increase for real address replacements because it's sometimes already a barrier to have a landowner pay for their own replacement sign. It's currently $30 and I think we proposed $35. That's what in this estimate here. Just so that there's not a huge barrier for people to keep those signs current because it is what facilitates emergency responders on the ground as well as your, post office and UPS drivers, but it's really to encourage them to have that good signage there.
So I want to add, and I know this program isn't alone in this, and we'll run into a few more of those. So we do have an ordinance related to addressing, but there's no state mandate that the county does addressing. Or well, maybe not addressing, but the whole sign things, right? It can be done at the town level. But there's a component of that from a staffing standpoint as we talk about the parcel mapping. So putting all of that on there and managing all of the GIS type services. So that's essentially done by two staff members, Rachel and Brittany, right? So what having this program does is it allows us to supplement a little bit of that cost of those two employees. And quite frankly, there are certainly times where we need two, we could potentially need three in order to manage all of the changes that are happening. So in some cases, some of these little programs, as much as they're time and they cost money, they actually are providing us additional revenue that we wouldn't have if we didn't have that. We'd still have two people doing addressing. We just wouldn't have the additional revenues that come with providing those addresses. So yeah, I think that's something to keep in mind as you look at some of those programs. Is in some cases we're actually making money by doing that, in that fact that we're able to have the two staff members but not fully pay for the two. She didn't know I was going to say that.
No, but I appreciate it. Any other questions?
Doesn't look like it. Thank you.
All right. Legal support services. Andrea, I saw that you were here. I can't explain this one.
All right, so I don't know how much you want to stir the pot in trying to get some additional revenue. Right now, my office has a part-time deferred prosecution coordinator, and we utilized what are called deferred acceptance of guilty pleas as part of plea negotiations in certain cases. It's very successful. We have about a 75% success rate, and it is a great program and opportunity for individuals because many of them, they're for our low risk, medium risk offenders, will resolve a case potentially with a plea and probation on a misdemeanor offense. And then we have a felony deferred agreement hanging over their head. And then if successful, usually the charge gets dismissed. Sometimes it gets amended down to an ordinance or it gets amended to a misdemeanor. So the part of that's very, I guess, useful is also if we have victims who are out money, Dunn County residents who want their money back, this is a good way to get it done. A lot of times when they go on probation, it just gets converted to a civil judgment and they don't see it. And so we use it for a good way to make a victim whole. That being said, when I asked for the position back in 2015, there was discussion about charging participants, as Eau Claire County and St. Croix County do charge their participants. A fee, I think Eau Claire charges around $300, St. Croix maybe $100, but I'm not sure. And so that I think helps support those positions that are their deferred prosecution coordinators. And I don't know how many of you have been to a CJCC meeting, but lately we're pretty cordial. Like we listen to Sarah Benedict, we have a little bit of discussion, nothing gets heated, but these were very heated discussions. So there's the concern that we're a poor county. There's low risk individuals who are already struggling financially, and then to charge them a fee on top of that and say you'll be convicted of a crime or we're extending this over your head for an additional time because you can't pay for the program really brought a lively discussion to CJCC meetings. So I'm not saying you should or should not do this, but I'm saying it's a possibility to have revenue out there. I think one of the more problematic cases is individuals who are operating after revocation that I see it's sort of a frequent low-level crime, low level in the fact that it's an unclassified misdemeanor. Sometimes those individuals have racked up ticket after ticket. They have like thousands of dollars to pay before they can get their license back. And so they do this deferred agreement to give them 12 months to try to save up, and they wait for their income tax return. And then at the end, we amend it to an ordinance and they have to pay $263.50. And they still need a payment plan for that. And so this would be adding additional fees on top of that. So again, it's a very sensitive issue, but it's a way that the county could consider adding some revenue. I would also add, I don't know if Sarah's still on the call or not, but I know the county used to charge deferred or treatment court participants a fee after they went through different phases. And the deferred prosecution coordinator, it's a half-time position. It's not a ton of work. It's some work, but compared to the amount of services and time we're putting into individuals, we're not charging anyone for treatment court, and there's grant funds associated with that and Department of Corrections as well. So it's a complicated issue. It might affect DOC, might affect grants. It might be something the county does or doesn't want to do, but I'm throwing it out there as a potential revenue.
Thank you. Any questions?
Good idea.
This is Sarah on the phone. So thank you, Andrea, for bringing this up. So we did previously have treatment court fees of $750, and Corp Council reviewed that and recommended that we eliminate those fees because there's an order of fee payment, and the county is on the bottom of the list as far as fee payment. Restitution goes first, fines and fees go first. Everything goes ahead of the county ask. So it was actually Corp Council's decision to say that we should eliminate our fees.
Looks like it. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I will point out again, this is a discussion of all the potential available revenue sources. Some of them may be great ideas, some of them may be terrible ideas. Some of them fall in between, but these are the discussions that we, in terms of policy and how we're spending money, these are the kinds of discussions that we need to be having. Supervisor Wilsey,
Was that previous Corp Council or you?
that would have been previous.
Okay. Is that something you're willing to take a look at again?
Yes, I will.
Okay, thank you.
All right. I think I skipped the land and water resource management. So that's another one of those fees for grant reviews. So just kind of basic, a lot of those different grants and charging an additional fee to be able to process those on behalf of others. And snowmobile trails. So snowmobile trails are another thing. I know this one specifically is something that only the county can apply for these funds. So the way that works is the snowmobile club comes to the Environmental Services Department and specifically Chase's area and says, hey, we want to put in this bridge or we want to do this. They apply for a grant from the state, they get the money, and then they give them the money in order to build the bridge. And so that time that staff member spends submitting the grant and processing all of that is something that the county essentially pays for, right? So that the grant doesn't cover that. So this is looking at to say, all right, we'll do this, we'll file that grant on your behalf, but we're going to charge you X amount of money in order to do that. So that's what that particular charge is related to.
Supervisor Bauer.
Who inspects the bridge after it's done? Do they have to send a man out to look at it to make sure it's legally put in? Because I know you can't just throw a bridge everywhere and it's got to be trout streams and all kind of stuff. So would that cost be more if we sent a guy out? I mean, could we do that as well?
Yeah, I don't know the specifics there, but my guess is there's a whole lot of environmental review that is done before those things are. No, I'm getting a no from the back of the room. So, yeah. So, all right. Yeah. So I think that's something, to bring up to that department, but I know that, like I say, it's something that is taking our staff's time to be able to do that. It's certainly a good service, but. Yep. All right. Property tax collection. It's all right. It was I'm playing the role of Chase today.
The treasurer's office, we currently charge for the tax bill collection for first installment for 13 of the 30 municipalities. That rate had not been modified since 2020. So we are sending out contracts, increasing that to $2.50. So it's about $1,800. So that will be reflected in the 2026 budget. Some, excuse me, I got a little bit of a cold. Some of the other changes that I'm evaluating, which right now are appearing to be kind of a break even, is we have a very expensive folding machine and stuffer. And last year it didn't work most of tax season. So the service people are about 3 hours away. So it's caused kind of more headaches than positive in the office. So we have been researching with LMN how they contract for folding and stuffing and or mailing. And so that still might be an option because it could save on some potential staff time. Actually running the machine and processing, we would still print, but that is also another cost that can be evaluated. But as of right now, the $2,000 is something that we'll be moving forward with. Any other questions?
Nope, doesn't look like it. Thank you.
And so I'd point out, I think this is a good example of some of these changes as we look forward to them, that's not something like if they want to implement that change, that we have to give proper notice to people to in this case, the municipalities that your cost is going to go up. So that is something that's more of a 2027 thing. And I think part of that reoccurring theme of why we need to continue to look at these things is if you want to see those savings, to be able to implement them in October, or to identify them in October to be implemented in January in many cases is not realistic. All right. So as we kind of finish up fees, I think this is something to also think about as you're looking at fee increases and what that looks like from a budgetary and a future kind of mindset, right? As we increase a fee, and the example of the last one that was last updated in 2020. And so when you implement that, as we talk about, if you were to talk about increasing a fee in order to cover a salary increase, right? You increase that fee in 1 year, it covers the salary increase that year, but it doesn't cover the salary increase the next year unless you increase the fee again, right? And so that's kind of what is being demonstrated here, is being able to, looking at those fees, and is it something that you can move up? I'm not saying that we shouldn't increase fees, but in a lot of cases, if we're doing that just a certain amount of money, you're only causing a 1 year fix to that, and another problem is going to show up in that next year. So this is just a little, and you'll see more examples of very similar things showing up in the future here. So I guess that's something as you're working with your departments and, hey, this fee can be done, should we be looking at a policy about how we increase that fee on an annual basis to be able to do that and maintain that, and what does that look like? And once again, that might get back to the policy of, X amount of increase on an annual basis, or must be reviewed every 3 years, something like that. So this is one that's a little unique. Jake's in the back, but I think I can speak unless you want to. So this particular item is the core of those costs are our equipment replacement fund. So we utilize that for like all of our computers, and what ends up happening is departments pay essentially a fifth of a computer every year, so that when 5 years comes up, there's enough money saved in our computer replacement fund to be able to buy them a new computer. And what that means then is we're not buying a whole bunch of computers on the capital improvement as part of the capital improvement project, which may be borrowing to buy replacement computers or something like that. So that was something that was implemented. I'd love to take credit for it, but it happened like a year before I started to start that equipment replacement fund. These particular items we had some items in the IT budget that were to replace some of our larger equipment. And what I had done over time is move some of that operational cost. It's stated as an operational cost, but to put it so that we were just setting aside more money in the computer replacement fund so that when we needed to buy new core switches or new firewall, there was a little bit of money offsetting the capital improvement costs. So last year, for example, there was about $60,000 that came out of the computer replacement fund to pay for some of the network equipment replacements. So this is an item that we can take out of the operational costs. So we wouldn't budget it on an annual basis, but that would mean that when you needed to replace those items, it would fall in the capital improvement plan, and you would have to identify another funding source. Maybe that's borrowing, maybe that's fund balance, maybe that's something else, but we wouldn't have that money kind of set aside to cover that. This was never covering 100% replacement, but it was setting aside a little bit of that. So we could do that. That frees up that operational fund, but it would put then that decision back on the capital improvement side. That makes sense?
Mhm.
All right. So that's kind of what that option is, and it's just a different strategy and related to some of the larger IT purchases. All right. Ordinance and policy changes. This is the lively part of the debate, because this one does probably fall within this committee as something to be discussed. So so if you look at this, this was I can't remember what the total cost of this particular program was, but it was pretty large. And what that amounted to, what the program is a lot of staff time putting together department reports and attending meetings and preparing anything related to these committee meetings. This particular savings, though, that's being added, once again, that's people time, right? So we can there's a benefit to saving people time, but not in the budget. So this cost savings here really looks at how many people, setting some policies around how many people, supervisors, are allowed to attend the WCA conference that was last week. Looking at how often we are holding committee meetings that maybe don't have action items or don't have additional value that is being provided to those. So there's I think it's a $50 per diem that you get plus mileage. So you look at some of those meetings, they can get pretty costly. And if they last 5 minutes, the cost per minute goes up considerably. So looking at some different ways of looking at how we hold those meetings to decrease the amount of costs that is associated with that, as well as the conference thing. So we put in here a suggestion around a minimum of quarterly meetings. Obviously, we had some discussion in this committee last time about, and we're having it again, right? The role of the committees and overseeing the departments and kind of know what's going on. So you need to be able to do that. So it's quarterly often enough to be able to get a good feel of what's going on. And once again, that's minimum quarterly. If there's action items, you would hold that meeting, but if there isn't, we wouldn't do that. And I think there's something, I don't know if it's in there, but maybe even just looking at, even if you hold monthly meetings, that departmental reports are only done on a quarterly basis, right? See, and that's not going to save time. It's not going to save money, but it would save some time on the staff side of having to develop those reports 12 times. They would only have to do them 4 times. So that's what Andrew did a lot of the work on this and identified that amount of money in implementing some of those types of changes.
Mr. Chairman?
Supervisor Morehouse.
Yes, thank you. I just want to say that as we're looking at making cuts to departments and shifting funding and so on, this is a good one. I mean, we should include ourselves in this process. So I'm like fully on board with this one.
Thank you, Supervisor Morehouse. Anybody else?
So we'll probably put something together, and I think this is the appropriate committee to bring that back to,
Mhm.
and so we'll.
And I think that that's an appropriate set of considerations for us to be looking at.
All right, accounts payable.
All right, good evening. So of course, we also recognize some potential for savings. So ours might not be as cutting the revenue down, or I'm sorry, or the expense, but it's more of shifting staff, being more efficient at what we do. That will free up time to perhaps absorb other departments, areas that perhaps need some of that office clerical type of duties. So right now, we're working with Bremer Bank to use their platform to onboard ACH and also onboard on how we actually pay our vendors. So right now we have a lot of checks that we cut. So this will shift the printing and setting up all those bank information accounts with Bremer. So our like a hard cost for paper printing, those types of things will be about like that $5,000-6,000. The rest, I call it a soft cost because that is free up staff time. Also, of course, there is a fee for that service. However, we're able to absorb that with our existing agreement and how much money we keep with Bremer, and interest will pay for that. So it's $150 to start the first onboarding, which is our PCART program. And then there is a one-time fee of $2,800 or so, and that again is going to be absorbed with our existing. So per se, we're not going to be writing a physical check for that.
I would,
So, yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say, we do have it in there that there's this notion towards centralized purchasing, and I think this is something related to our ERP that
Right.
that we're looking to implement, and we did project some savings in having a centralized purchasing item. One of the examples that we use, and so I think we're working on it actually right now, is buying paper in bulk for the county. Right, so that's something right now, different departments each buy their own paper off of Amazon, Staples, whatever they want. All right, and would we get a better value if we put that up to bid, buy a pallet of paper, and then charge that back to the different areas? So we do think that there'll be some savings in identifying some of those areas with multiple contracts, and that's in soft costs and in real costs.
Right. Not to mention the staff that's involved making that happen. And another prime example, even though it's already built into our 26 budget, is CJC, or Sarah mentioned that she was able to give up a 0.5 FTE because we are still restructuring, and we restructured to save some time. So that person was able to absorb that and continue on providing that work.
Supervisor Steen?
Yes, have you given any thought to how promptly you pay your bills and extending when you pay them and then utilizing the float as income?
Oh, absolutely. And this is where Bremer comes in. So they have a platform that will allow us to send the file that here's who gets paid, and they'll take care of that. We in our system set up the net when those are due. So typically we want to hold on to the money as long as possible so we grow interest. Now, some vendors, and we are exploring that to see if we pay early, do they offer a discount? So, and again, this will come with the procurement person who's negotiating and dealing with the vendors to see if there's a room to negotiate some of those terms.
Thank you.
I think that's it.
All right.
Thank you, Beata.
So, this next one, Andrew had put together. So this has got the star next to it, which means it was a voluntary program. So this is something that he had brought up. So you may remember it was probably about a year ago, we designated the Colfax Messenger as the county newspaper. Prior to that, the Dunn County News was the newspaper. So there are requirements in statute that say if you have a designated newspaper, you must do this. You must submit it. So you essentially have to pay for it to be published to be able to do that. If you do not designate one, you don't have to pay the newspaper in order to put it in there. So this is the projected savings that he's looking at to say if we just didn't, it doesn't stop us from doing that. And there's certain notifications that we do have to put up in every newspaper that over a certain amount of whatever that serves the county. But there are some items where we wouldn't have to actually put it in the newspaper, and that's where that savings comes from. Certainly a balance there as it relates to communicating with the public. But nonetheless, that's about how much we pay.
Supervisor Kinnear, I'm pretty sure you're going to jump in on this one.
Well, I'm just curious how much we spend on the newspaper and publishing.
Yeah, it's more than that. So, yeah. What do you say? So yeah, so he budgets 30,000. So he's looking that he could save 20,000. And so that's just those notifications that don't require us to publish it in a newspaper unless we've designated one. So, and obviously there's other media sources to be able to get the word out outside of the official newspaper.
Supervisor Bauer.
Is the website one of the numbers that you could use? I mean, it's on our calendar, everything's on the calendar for like the notifications of meetings and
Yep.
stuff. Is that one of the numbers you can use?
Well, so this where there's different classifications of notice that you have to do. And so some of those classifications would say you need to publish it with the media. And some of them will say you need to publish it with every with your county newspaper, or some of them will say for every newspaper with a distribution over a certain amount in your county. So the definition of what that is kind of that legal, but I think that's where, as Andrew looks at it, he's looking at about $10,000 are those. So as we talk about the budget, so if you approve the budget today, it has to go out to a notice. That's going to have to go to every newspaper in the county with a distribution over whatever, because that's like a Class A notice. Tammy's here. I know she has to do notices for Board of Adjustment and for rezones, right? And so that so, and I don't know the specific rules around those particular notices, but it really comes down to that statutory language. This is, if you've done this, then you have to. If you didn't do it, then you don't. And then it's just a matter of how can we get the word out. So it's not to say that we're not going to share it with the public who just don't have to do it in the newspaper and pay them. There's a little bit of time savings related to that too. Any questions? All right, we're moving along. Reductions in operating expense. So we have the treatment court and treatment opportunity program. Sarah, are you still there?
Yes, I am. Thank you. So we are proposing reducing operating costs for both programs. Because we have grant funding, that does save county dollars, and the more grants we have, the more county dollars that we save. So those were some proposed savings that we're careful not to supplant. We can't take what is already in the budget and then use grant funding for. So, you know, we're getting pretty close to that with these grants being due tomorrow to the state for 2026. But these are definitely savings that we'll be able to see in 2027. And it gives us time to see what those savings are. We are looking, some of the standards change as far as drug testing. That's probably the most expensive thing that we pay for with those programs. It is critical to the integrity of those programs. It is critical to the partners, public safety partners, to ensure that people are held accountable and that there's drug testing to back that up. But we are looking at proposing some savings in the drug testing operational area, and then also with training, using grant funding to support team training. Treatment court in particular, it's a multidisciplinary team. So we have the sheriff's office, we have the city police, we have the courts, we have the DA's office, the public defender, and the Department of Corrections. Typically, to follow the model, it requires annual training every year. And it is in our budget, our levy budget at the CJCC, to cover the expenses for that team training. We are looking at offsetting that with grant funding. So again, looking at ways that we can really maximize the grant funding to pay for some of the costs for treatment court. And then to a lesser extent for the treatment opportunity program, because those, again, are a smaller percent of levy funding. And as we get into a 4-year funding cycle, most of the funding goes to the staff wages and benefits, because those costs are increased every year. So that means less operational costs. But in 2027, it's competitive, meaning we can ask for more funding to really pay for the full program. So really looking for those savings in the future. Any questions?
Does not look like it.
Okay, I can speak to the next few. Those are programs within the Human Resources Division. So employee recruitment and onboarding, hopefully that speaks for itself, but that is us recruiting to fill vacancies or any new positions. Within our HR budget, we currently budget $8,500 per year for any operating expenses relating to recruitment. That covers job ads, any job fairs that we attend, things like that. Over the last 4 to 5 years, I've reviewed budget to actual, and we've actually spent less than we've budgeted significantly. And so looking to just reduce that line item by 3,000. The impact to this potentially, because we don't know what recruitments we will have throughout a year, we can't anticipate that always. If I needed to budget for a high level recruitment or something of that nature that requires expensive job ads or any sort of recruiting services, we would potentially need to request contingency fund or something like that if our budget can't cover that. But for the most part, I think this is a really safe reduction and won't have any major impacts. As well, the Talent and Leadership Development Program. This is a program that we started in 2024 in recognition of all of our new management staff, also anticipating a third of our staff retiring in the near future, knowing that we need to invest in training and developing the people that we have here. So we have provided opportunities starting in 2024 and throughout this year to both our leadership employees as well as non-management employees. And we looked at, okay, what could we do away with for next year? And we're able to find about a $12,000 that it would reduce the amount of opportunities that are provided to employees, but we feel like we can keep the program alive while reducing those operating expenses. I do want to note as well, with my assignment to assistant county manager, that takes a quarter of me away from the team. And we didn't add any FTE to make up for that. And so we had to reallocate some staff across more programs. So we've already made changes in 2025 that have taken away from that dedicated initiative. Any questions?
Supervisor Vogel.
Thank you. So is there collaboration amongst other counties with training so that you could, pick and choose, from other places, so it would reduce?
Yes, I
time?
will say we've partnered with Stout on a few offerings that they do to help them offset costs, and obviously it's cheaper for us. And there have been a few discussions already between our talent, our HR manager assigned a talent and the extension program that focuses on community development and leadership, and actually looking to pull together a meeting of leaders from surrounding counties and municipalities, City of Altoona, City of Eau Claire, to start to talk about, can we create a shared curriculum and really dive into that. So we're excited to see what that could entail, hoping that opportunity could kind of fill the gap on the cuts that we're proposing here. So more to come on that. Sure. So Austin had reviewed the budget for fleet vehicles. Essentially, we pay a lease for each vehicle. And the amount that's been budgeted year over year has not been spent. So there's an ability to reduce the budget for that by 10,500 and not have to remove a fleet. There are additional, if you read the full report, I did send it to you, some light reading there. There are other considerations that we can look into that would reduce the number of fleet vehicles that we lease. But this is a really safe start, in Austin's opinion. I think the reason for the difference in budget to actual anticipates any sort of fluctuation in interest or whatever the contract entails for that. And so it was the safest recommendation as of now, and continue to look into other opportunities.
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Kristen, do you want to come up? Yep. 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 So yeah, so you'll see there's an additional submission here from UW Extension, and then the next slide is all UW Extension. So yeah, I turned the mic.
Thank you. Thanks for having me here tonight. So in the course of putting together the document for the proposed cuts in the priority, when we were asked to look at additional cuts, I always say that, once you remove educators from these positions, then you lose the program. And so it doesn't make sense then to have support for programs if we don't have the program. And so what I've done, when I came into this position 3 years ago, there was a zero support for the 4-H program, and that was noticeable in the sense of enrollment and then also in engagement of programs. However, we still had a 4-H program. So in the last 3 years, with the work with the committee, the extension or the CRTC committee, we have increased that support for 4-H, and we have seen increased enrollments. We have had more programs for youth, more engagement with schools, more engagement with other youth serving organizations. So we've definitely seen the impact of that investment for our youth in the community. However, it is something that, can have a Cadillac or Ford Pinto type of, so it depends on where you would like to see as a committee those dollars being allocated. But that is the amount that's spent currently on a .4 4-H assistant. That's a new position. We've seen some fantastic work out of Anne. And then we have a summer intern. That summer intern is instrumental with the fair, with summer programs. Our kids are out of school during that time, so we have a lot of youth programs that happen during the summer, and our summer intern does help with that. But those are the two areas that we were looking at operationally. I did put a little caveat in the report at the end that I think it would be really important to go back to the committee and have these discussions with our committee and also look at the operational costs. So when asked to do this, I was on vacation, so full transparency, I had to have some other team members come in. I haven't had a look at some of that, but I would like to also do that with the committees, so. And so what precipitated that was that these 4 programs were identified as potential programs for elimination. And so I just wanted to bring forward, and I put in a pretty lengthy document. If you have questions on that, I'm really happy to address that because I think not a lot of our committee obviously is very aware of our structure and how our partnership with the county. Other county board members may not be as knowledgeable on the in-depth partnership that you have with UW-Madison Extension. And so we have a co-funded model where there's a flat fee that's paid for all of our educators for the county, for all counties across the state. It's the same fee. And last year that was 47,000 something for a full 1.0 FTE and includes salary and fringes. The state pays the rest of that portion. So in these 3 positions, what you also see is that, or 4, I'm sorry, all 4 of these positions are also shared across 3 counties. So that's reducing your cost even further. And so when we look at the actual expenses for these programs that are bringing some pretty high value to the county, it's pretty minimal. So for and if we were to try to cut costs, because most of that cost is personnel or contractual. 3 of those educators are located in other counties, and so they absorb more of the cost for these educators, and that's why you'll see some of the fluctuation. And then your crops and soils, livestock is here. Ryan is housed here in Dunn County. With the agriculture program, we also have them they are also paying for their computers and some of their travel, all of their travel actually. So there's some cost savings there, and that's just the way that institute is structured because they're more regional. And then with the other 2 program areas, community development, which Jenna had referenced, Garrett is shared across 3 as well as the horticulture. So I'm happy to answer any questions about those, but I will say that any reductions to those will come out of the fee, which would then eliminate the program in the county. Some of the, obviously not having that research-based information coming to the counties and working with the constituents in Dunn County to identify needs and address those, that would be a huge loss. But then also, when we reallocate FTEs with UW-Madison Extension, there's other counties that we can only afford on the Madison side, right, so much as well. We have a budget. And so those FTE allocations are then reallocated across the state. So getting those back to a county is really difficult. And so just to keep that in mind, and then also it is a partnership with your 2 counties, your 2 closer counties. And so, jeopardizing that relationship with those counties as well. And so that's kind of where those cost benefits are, and happy to answer any questions from the report or our structure even.
Seeing any?
Thank you.
Great. So that is all of the programs, and I think really knowing that we kind of had that balanced and how we were going to go forward, I did think it was important for you to hear all of that there's a lot of different things related to every single program. There's always different options. There's different ways to find revenue, to cut expenses, or to do that. And all of them have different impacts or different complexities to them. And so it's really requires a kind of a deep dive into every one of those things in order to do that. And so I thought that was valuable to share that. So this slide is going to kind of set up the next few slides. And I do want to kind of just caution to the point that this is to demonstrate kind of what some of the changes are that can be done and what that looks like over time. So as you're having these discussions in your committees, really thinking about what does this look like in kind of solving future budget problems, or what are the implications in these different things. So so what we did is we grabbed, and I say we, Jenna did it, grabbed the total FTE for the programs that we just went over. And so that's a total of 52.88 FTE and a total personnel cost of 4.6 million. All right, so that's just as we wanted to grab a sampling of programs to be able to demonstrate what those costs look like. So you can see there was an average of about 87% of the total cost is in personnel, and that's true in almost every one of our departments. Some departments get into the upper 90s. Some of them, are maybe 70, but for the most part, it's pretty high personnel costs is where we live. So, so we calculated this number, this 88,000 per FTE. That's simple 52.88 divided by 4.6 million divided by 52. It kind of comes out to about that 88,000. So just to give us an idea of like what the cost of an employee is. And as we were looking through this, I want to point out if we put a slide in, but as you look at, we use the term fully burdened, right? So that is the cost of an employee plus their benefits and all of that. So it's not somebody's salary, that's the total cost to have that employee. And I think what's important to look at, I had an example of an employee who made $57,000 a year. Their fully burdened cost was $101,000. Right? That's when you throw in those benefits, a significant amount. That same employee that doesn't take county benefits only costs 65,000, right? So positions, you really have to kind of look at that and understand that there's a lot of difference from employee to employee. And even as we talk about wage variance and things like that, that's a huge impact on a department's budget if an employee chooses to take benefits or comes off of benefits. Bring that forward. So this slide is just a little graph of what this looks like. Is the blue line is our 52 employees with their 3% increase over time, right? That's what that cost looks like. The orange line is revenues, right? So our revenues are going to go up. So if we implement increased fees in 2027 for $250,000, okay, you can see that orange line moves up, and that solves the problem until 2029. And then the problem comes back again, right? That we have to go find that revenue because that one increase was only a one-time increase, and then it just gradually continues to go up. So this is just with fees, an increase in fees. There's a lot of expenses like that. If they're a one-time expense, this is or a one-time revenue increase, that's kind of what happens. The next slide, did I double click that? Oh. Is that same $250,000 increase, or sorry, yeah, the increase in revenue or in fees, sorry, along with a decrease in FTE, so a total of 4 FTE over 4 years. So this is demonstrating essentially eliminating one position. And we really talk about this if you're going to go down a path of personnel, attrition is the preferred method of doing that. So that's an employee leaves and we don't fill that position, right? So this is over 4 years if you do that. So that same $250,000 fee increase in this particular scenario lasts you till 2032. So that's 4 positions over 4 years. It just takes a little bit of time. As we go through that, there's this gap between the revenue and expense. And I think this is something we go forward, and we'll talk about this kind of going forward. So that's there's an operational reserve that happens there. And because we know that our revenues are not keeping up with our expenses, if you fill that with an operational cost, you continue to compound the problem. So some of that gap has to be one-time money, or has to be one-time cost, whether that's capital improvements or different things like that. Because in the future, that line's going to start coming up and we're going to need that operational money. And then the next slide is the more dramatic version of 4 positions in 1 year. So that 4 positions in 1 year actually has the same time. So we still get out to about 2032 before those lines connect. But we have a larger gap between the blue and the orange, which once again is that it's kind of operational money, but if you use it for operations, you just move the blue line right back up to the orange line. So that's just something to think about as you do that, because those personnel costs, they compound. You give that person a raise, and then you give them another percentage on top of that percentage, and another percentage on top of that percentage. Whereas when you do a fee, it doesn't do that. It just does it in that one point in time. So this is obviously demonstrating some of maybe the worst case scenario of eliminating positions. This one being more dramatic, whereas this one being a more of an attrition type way of going about that, but just to demonstrate how we can get there. I know the discussion has come up a few times as it relates to the solar projects and if they ever show up. And I think that's something as it relates, it's a chart very similar to this, right? That imagine the blue line staying straight, but the orange line went up a lot higher, right? At some point, they're going to come back together. And that's where it'll be on us to make sure that don't fill that gap of that operational cost, because we know that that's coming in. Utilize that money for one-time costs as it goes forward. But I just wanted to kind of demonstrate the difference between an increase in fees and a decrease in expenses that compound. This is FTE, this is personnel, right? Another example of that is a software application, right? Most of the software that we buy goes up 5% a year, right? So that has that same path forward as that employee is, that it's compounding over time. So those changes have a much longer term impact than kind of that one-time fee increase. So just wanted to demonstrate that. And this is kind of based on those exact numbers that we were sharing before, that 88,000 per employee. And there's the 3 graphs bouncing back and forth. I forgot this slide was there. The 3 graphs right next to each other and kind of what that looks like. Yo.
You want to go back one? So that top graph, that is what that would look like. If we said, okay, great, for 2027, let's increase fees and we will have 250,000 more in revenue for that budget. But if we maintain FTE, you can see by 2028, we're looking at an issue again. And that's where we would, like, we've run out of time, right? We don't have time to reduce staff by attrition anymore. And that's where we would need to look at cutting positions with people in them. And so that we're in this model trying to demonstrate how we can be proactive in not getting to that point, but gradually getting to a more realistic and sustainable path over time. Thank you.
All right. What everybody showed up for today, right? All right. All right. So that being said, we can move forward. Obviously, we do have an action item for the budget, which has been shared with you in its balanced form. And this is where we get into what does that 2027 budget approach look like, right? What sort of things do you need from us, or what are the practice changes that we need to implement? You can see the strategic plan on there. So that is something that we plan on doing with the thumbs up of this committee that says, yes, go ahead with that. We'll work towards a strategic plan. But I do think as we talk about that strategic plan, one of the things that we look at is there are certainly things that we want to do and do better as a county. But along those same lines, part of that strategic plan has to look at how do we get to in a position where we can actually make those decisions, right? Like we're not in a position of saying, how do we add additional things that we want to do because we want to do this better, we want to do that better. We're just trying to get by. So part of that strategic plan is how do we get ourselves in a position where we can pursue some of those things that we want to as a county. Standing committee review. Oh, yes. So, yeah, and so that was part of that as we go through all of those programs to as committee chairs, right? How do we look through those different programs that report to your committee to be able to do a little bit of a dig into those areas? And you can reach out to us independently about how you want to do that. You can work with the department heads in your committee to be able to do that. Some of the committees, they probably have a total of 10 programs that report to them. Some of them, I'm trying to decide whether, actually, I think PR&D, Judiciary and Law, and Health and Human Services all are in the 40s. So there's a lot of different programs. So part of that is going to be how do we look through prioritizing to be able to do that? Or you could hold 6-hour-long meetings, but that's kind of where we are. Any questions, comments?
Just
Supervisor Quinn.
with regard to that, so you're suggesting that the committees begin considering how they can develop strategic planning around these budget cut proposals.
So we'll do a countywide or strategic plan, but I do think that there's a lot that's going to have to happen within the committees as well, right? Because if every committee comes back and says,
this is not for, so this is really for next year.
So, yeah.
That's what's important to keep in mind.
What I was going to say is the action item before you is, once we get it on the actual floor, is very much in terms of solving the problem for 2026. Much of the program review and the strategic planning is going to be, it's not so much around proposed budget cuts as proposed as actual revenue limitations. So just the discussion over the next year is going to be about how do we address those revenue limitations in a way that ideally kicks the can down the road, at least until I'm off the board.
See, I didn't bring up in that graph that I'll be 57 years old with 32 years of WRS experience at yeah, when the lines meet. So
yeah, so the strategic planning is really, it's about 2027, but it's much more about 27, 28, 29, 30. Are there decisions that we can make for the 27 budget that will set things up so that we have, let me say that, set things up so that whoever is in this seat at that point and all of your seats at that point have a little bit more flexibility and are a little bit less straighted in their decision-making process. I think that's how I would frame it. So. Okay, I would need a motion and a second to adopt the FY 2026 draft budget, draft balanced budget to bring forward for discussion, well, to bring forward to show the full board. So I need a motion and a second, and then any
I'll
further
move approval,
discussion.
Mr. Chairman.
Supervisor Morehouse moves. Supervisor Wilsey seconds. Right. Does anyone have any clarifying questions, or are we all sufficiently confused to let it roll for a bit? Seeing no questions, first call for debate. Second call for debate. Okay, we're going forward with what we've got. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Okay, Supervisor Quinn.
Just a question. I mean, with regard to the presentation to the board, are you planning on actually presenting the budget numbers, or are we going to go with something similar?
Yeah, no.
We don't have to do that,
That was to,
Okay.
that was to,
You will lose some people.
that was, the point of this conversation was directly
Okay.
to the chairs of the committees so that we have that path going forward. No, they'll get,
The gentler,
the,
happier version.
hey, it's balanced. Yeah. So, yep.
Okay. Anybody else? All right. 6B, resolution to approve fund balance and net working capital policy. I would need a motion in a second. Supervisor Steen
Can I
moves.
just,
Oh, sorry.
there's one item that I need to change. There's one item within the policy that says county administrator that should say county manager. So
Okay.
just
With
So-
with the caveat of correcting the we'll go with typo. Supervisor Steen, does your motion stand with that correction?
Most certainly.
All right, I need a second. Supervisor Prognow seconds. Any clarifying questions? This is a room that is out of brain. All right, first call for debate. Second call for debate. Seeing none. Oh, Supervisor Steen.
Yeah, have we established what the parameters are gonna be?
Dan?
the parameters are written within the policy. So,
Okay.
the-
withdraw my vote.
Yep. Yep. So yes, they are in there. And yes, my typo of county administrator is because it is a copy and paste
Yeah. no.
from a different county, but
All right, so that was on the second call for debate. We are now, assuming nobody else has another question or comment. Right, we are ready to vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. 6C, 2025 budget amendment, Human Services, Health Department. You have all seen 9 million of these at this point. I need a motion in a second. Supervisor Steen moves, Supervisor Bauer seconds. Any clarifying questions? Okay, seeing none. First call for debate.
Mr. Chairman, are we
Yes,
voting on
Supervisor Morehouse.
both? Are we voting on both?
Yes, they are,
Okay.
they are an item.
Okay.
Second call for debate. All right, seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Review of reports, resolutions, and ordinances coming to the county board from the standing committees, Committee on Administration, resolution adopting the 2026 pay plan and wage structures, resolution adopting the 2026 health and dental premiums. Does anyone have any, this goes through from the committee. Does anyone have any questions that they need answered before we move on past these? All right, seeing none. Item B, planning, resources and development. And this is the rezone, and then the resolution authorizing application for surface water grants from Department of Natural Resources. Any questions?
Mr. Chairman.
Absolutely.
the
Supervisor
Hetch-
Morehouse.
On the Hetch rezone, on the second page, it suggests that the town of Red Cedar will redo its map. It's the town of Weston. It's a
Oh,
mistake.
good catch. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, we got it. Anybody else? All right. Reports from standing committees. I'm going to start with Vaughn since he's not here. Okay, admin is clear. Supervisor Bauer.
Sorry, we have not met since our last meeting. We have moved it up last month, so I have nothing new to report, I guess.
Thank you, Supervisor Bauer. Supervisor Vogel.
Facilities Committee met on September 24th. We had a very long discussion of the audit of the Fair Board and recommendations for purchasing and cash handling. So finance and the Fair Board are going to work together to implement those recommendations and hopefully have very clear steps for specific situations so that they can move this forward and be in compliance with the county recommendations. Parks and Rec had a great report. He's looking at efficiencies, and he talked about the fleet vehicles and perhaps removing a car and a truck. So we'll continue to keep an eye on that for budgeting. The clean sweep was on September 25th, and they've been cleaning up the park. So they did Champney Park, Russian Slough, and Pine View, and so they painted pavilions, restrooms. They cleared a lot of brush and regraded at the Russian Slough. And so it looks great, and they've gotten lots of comments for all their work. So our next meeting is October 22nd.
Thank you, Supervisor Vogel. Yes, it was a lively meeting. My apologies for getting in a little bit late. Supervisor Prochnow.
Transit Highway hasn't met since the last meeting. Our next meeting is next week from the day, basically 8 o'clock. So I have nothing to report.
Thank you, Supervisor Prochnow. Supervisor Wilsey.
Thank you. Judiciary Law last met on Monday. The DA reported that the reimbursement rate for court docs, flash drives, and records will be capped by the state at $10. This will decrease revenue. So I think you got an email on that. And little bits of information, Clerk of Courts reported for jury trials this month. Dunn County year-to-date crashes, 541 crashes, 4 fatalities, 163 injuries. And I got to see a high-speed chase today. Nobody was injured. But I was at exit 45. I was just coming across the bridge. It threw out the things and the tires went flat, and then he flew through the intersection and they drew their guns and it was all over, but it was kind of neat to see. Anyways. They did report distracted driving is getting a lot worse. And they're having a lot of problems with people passing buses. They wanted to remind that it's a $767 fine and buses have cameras, so don't do it. They readmitted or they wanted you to know, and we talked about this last time, emergency contacts and driver's license is for the DOT website. So they're really asking people to go on the website and put emergency contacts. And last thing is just for information, community maps. It gives crash data, lane closures, legislation. So if it's of interest to you, you can go to community maps. So, and that is it from judicial.
Thank you, Supervisor Wilsey, and my apologies to you for missing traffic safety and EMS. Supervisor Quinn.
Thank you. PR&D has met twice, doing our share to up that budget. We had excellent reports as always from our departments. We reviewed at the previous meeting, we reviewed the county wildlife mitigation payments and approve them. And we did one review of one section of the goals and strategies and policy section of the proposed comprehensive plan. We met this morning again and reviewed, spent most of the time, I guess a rezone this on the thing last time also. This morning we reviewed, what did we do this morning? Well, mostly we reviewed again another section of the comprehensive plan draft having to do primarily with the intergovernmental relations, and that sort of ended up touching on some of the issues around the things like the data center construction. So it was a good discussion, and our next meeting will be in 2 weeks.
Thank you, Supervisor Quinn. Supervisor Kinnear.
Thank you. The neighbors of Dunn County met on the fourth Thursday, I think. And it's interesting, we were talking about allowing things on the agenda. We didn't allow something on an agenda and disappointed someone greatly, I think. But it was nice to have a policy. So it's there. CNA program is still up in the air, a little bit. Facilities is doing really good. Brady over there just does an amazing job. And there were 2 family days last week. And I happened on one of them, the tent out there, food, people, pets, kids, family days, and the residents are out there and they're having a great time. So I got to give them kudos for that. It was really nice. And we'll meet at our normal 4th Thursday in October, but not in November. That's it.
Thank you, Supervisor Kinnear. Supervisor Morehouse.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Health and Human Services Board last met on September 25th. We had our usual, always very good staff reports. The Public Health Department will be on track for budget. The Veterans Service Organization is on track for budget, of course, and the Department of Human Services has 2 out-of-home placements, so it is very likely that we will be in the red at the end of the year. We did have a financial report from the ADRC noting that the family care program is mandated for the county, and the county would have to pay in any case. But the grants and overhead costs on that program and on administrative costs are fully paid by the grant support that comes to ADRC. Excuse me, we looked at a resolution to provide funding for the SNAP program, given a whole series of federal changes that very likely will cost the state $117 million. We'll approve that at the next meeting because the chair forgot to put it on as an action item. We noted review of the vouchers, and again, pertinent to the out-of-home placements, the August out-of-home placement total was $159,000. Budget adjustments, our next meeting is October 23rd, and we have canceled our November meeting because it's Thanksgiving, and we may cancel our December meeting, depending on what's on the docket, because it's also Christmas. Thank you. That's my report.
And it saves money.
Right.
All right. Our next meeting, like this one, is a week ahead of when you would normally expect it to be, because the county board meeting is a week ahead of when you would normally expect it to be. So November 5th here at 3:30, the usual time. So not the 5:30 of tonight.
And thank you all for doing that for me. And listen, wonderful presentation.
You are welcome.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks a million.
And with that, we are adjourned.
Bye,
I'm gonna
everybody.
grab you for a quick second.